Hi grade 7s. Today we're going to keep having a look at the revision exam and we're going to be looking at paper 2, which is the Comprehension, Language Use and Literature. It's useful to work through papers like this to practice because you're going to be using the same format of exam up until you are in matric. So it's very useful to learn the way that questions are asked and the way that the papers are structured. So we're going to be working with section A, Comprehension. All right, hopefully you've had a look in your textbook and you've seen the questions. If you, for some reason, don't have your textbook and you want to press pause now and take down the questions or take a screenshot or answer them straight from the slide, please do so now. They go on from question 1 to 5 and then on the slide from 6 to 10. So if you haven't had a chance to answer them, I want you to please make sure that you have answered them before you continue. Good. So let's start with question 1. Is the story based on fact or fiction? And how can you tell? So this is a two-part question. It's for only 1 mark, but you need to make sure to answer both sides. So I want to quickly make sure that you know the difference between fact and fiction. First of all, let's look at fact. So something that's based on fact is known as non-fiction. It's something that is certainly true, factual, provable, something that actually happened, something in real life. Then we have fiction. Fiction is something untrue, something imagined, for example, a made-up story or novel, a fantasy. So I want to ask you, do you think the story that we read about the hikers was based on fact, something that actually happened, or do you think it was a fantastical made-up story just for the fun of it? Which one did you choose? Well, if you chose fiction, then I'm afraid you are incorrect. The correct answer is fact, and we'll have a look at why. So, is the story based on fact or fiction? How can you tell? I must admit that this text was quite difficult to tell because they didn't provide you with a reference or a source. If they actually give you a reference, a historical reference or a reference from where they got the text from, it's easier to spot if it's fantasy or not. But we can infer means to take a guess, that the story is most likely based on real events. So you need to write it in a sentence. I would go with something like, the story is based on fact. You get half a mark for stating which one you think is correct. And the most important part is you must be able to explain how can you tell. There's a few things you could say. If you've mentioned any of these, that's great. If not, please add to your answers in the form of an elaboration. So you could say that the places mentioned are real, the Drakensberg, etc. You could say it's about someone's personal experience. You could say you think it's based on fact because it's told in the first person. Now, there's a question, I'm sure. Do you all remember what it means if something is told in the first person? That means the text is written in the first person perspective. What does that mean, first person perspective? In the first person point of view, or from the first person perspective, the story is told from the narrator's perspective. This allows the narrator to give the readers their first-hand experience, including what they saw, felt, thought, heard, said, and did. So in the story, the narrator used first-person pronouns. In this case, our and we. We do get other first-person pronouns such as I, but they were not used in this particular story. Good. So you would get half a mark for saying that you think the story is based on fact, and half a mark for mentioning any one of these reasons. Number 2, they're asking you to describe the setting in detail. When and where did this story occur? All right. So important thing to know is this word, setting. Setting has to do with when and where a story takes place. So this particular story is set in the past. It's written in the past tense. You could have said that the story is set over 3 or 4 days. You could have mentioned the season, that it was likely autumn or winter, or that part of the story is set during a blizzard. A blizzard is a big snowstorm. Now the where. You could have said simply that the story is set in South Africa, or that it takes place in the Marine Needles area of the Drakensberg. It's for 2 marks. So you would get 1 mark for mentioning any one of these descriptions describing when. That means which tense, over how many days or weeks or years, the season, or perhaps if there's any changes of weather, you can also mention that in terms of setting. Then you get an additional mark for being more specific about where this occurred. Which country, which region, which province. As long as you've mentioned one of them, you get an additional mark. All right, let's look at number 3. In what 4 ways was the group prepared for what they encountered? You can mention any 4 of the following things. First of all, we know that they were experienced hikers and that they knew the area well. They also mentioned in the text that they each brought a backpack. They weren't just going on a picnic and got caught unawares. They brought food for 3 days, so they knew that they might be in the mountain for a while. They packed warm clothes, anticipating that the weather might change. They had suitable winter sleeping bags, so they knew that they might be on the mountain for a while and that they needed to keep warm. And a few people mentioned that they felt confident. That's fine. With a little bit of an explanation would be great. They brought fuel. It mentions that they used fuel to boil water. And the fact that they knew what to do in an emergency situation. You could have also said that they were prepared with the things that they needed for an emergency situation. Good. So that is for 4 marks. So you could have mentioned any 4 things as long as they come from the text. All right, you can't guess how they were prepared. You need to find some evidence. Then, number 4, they start off simply with a statement. So the group of friends experiences various emotions on the trip. You don't need to answer anything about that. It's just preparing you for the questions that follow. 4.1. Use 2 adjectives to describe the mood of the group as they set out on the first day. So you're looking for 2 words. They are adjectives. Adjectives, and you need to use the adjectives to describe. And what are you describing? The mood. Whose mood? The mood of the group. And which mood? The mood that they had as they set out on the very first day. Now that part is important. Their mood, not at the end, not when they were trapped, not when they were worried, but as they set out, in other words, as they began their journey on the very first day. Now, an adjective is a describing word. Adjectives describe nouns. So, be very careful. Check that you have used adjectives. They do not want adverbs describing verbs. They want describing words which are describing the mood. Now, mood is a noun. So, we describe nouns using adjectives. That's why they're asking for adjectives. Alright, so you could have mentioned any 2 words. You can use your own words. You don't need to use words from the text. The word should have a positive connotation. So in other words, when you read the word, you should know that on the very first day when they set out, the mood of the group was positive. Your words need to be adjectives, so check that it's not a noun or an adverb or anything else. They need to be spelled correctly. And here are some examples. For example, confident, excited, exuberant, happy, positive. Any 2 words that fulfill that criteria. All right. So you get a mark for mentioning any 2 positive adjectives to describe them on the first day. So be careful. I had 1 or 2 people who were describing the mood of the hikers while they were trapped or while they were waiting out the storm. They want to know as they set out. Setting out means as they started their journey, right in the very first paragraph. 4.2. At what point did they realize they were in trouble? They realized that they were in trouble when the snowstorm came on suddenly. So any clear full sentence describing the sudden change in weather, you could have said it's when their eyesight became obscured because of the snow, or when the blizzard started, or anything that's describing how the weather suddenly became difficult. So you get 1 mark for that. 4.3. Identify 1 phrase in the text that tells us that the group did not panic. I want to quickly break up this question a little bit to make sure you understand all parts. Identify is a word you'll see in many tests and exams. It means to find Often if you need to identify that, they want you to name or show it. They want you to find, name, or show one phrase. A phrase is a group of words, so you don't need to quote an entire sentence. Just a few words or a word will do. From the text, so you need to quote from the story. They want to know who, okay, the hikers, and they want you to prove that they remained calm. So 4.3, identify one phrase in the text that tells us that the group did not panic. You could mention the fact that they felt confident, in quotation marks, or you could explain that they decided what to do in a calm, logical way instead of panicking or rushing back down the mountain. And you could have explained or elaborated or justified on your answer by describing any of the actions that they took to prove that they were prepared and calm. So anything that you find in the text, as long as you've written it as part of a sentence as I did, and that you put the quotation in quotation marks. So you must use quotation marks, and those words in the quotation marks must be directly from the text. Number 5, what was their first priority and plan of action? Well, their first priority and plan of action. What was the most important thing they needed to do to stay safe? Even if you don't understand one of the words in the question, for example, if you didn't know what priority meant, what I like to do is, even if you put your hand or finger over that one word you don't understand, and then try to understand what the question means without it. So even if you read, what was their first and plan of action, you should be able to work it out, even if you don't know the meaning of priority. Priority is the most important thing. Their first priority was to find shelter. We can find it in the text when they say we needed to find shelter fast. You could have worded it in a different way. You could have said they needed to get out of the bad weather, they needed to find shelter from the blizzard or the storm, or they needed to pitch their tent or anything along those lines, as long as you found the evidence in the text. All right, good. So 1 mark for explaining that. Good. Make sure that you have made corrections and elaborated on your answer. In the next video, we'll work through the comprehension questions 6 to 12. If you have not completed them yet, then please give them a try before you watch the next video. I'm going to be doing the marking memo with you in the next video. They are on page 125 of your textbook. And that's all for now.